Thank you for attending this webinar on strategic planning. My name is Phil Gore. I'm the Director of Board Services for the Vermont School Boards Association. Strategic planning is one of my favorite topics. It's not too important that we get caught up on the nomenclature. So when I say strategic planning, I'm not stuck or married to those words. What's most important is the concept. The concepts of system thinking and strategic thinking. When we meld those together, you may call it in your district a roadmap. You may use a document like a profile of a graduate, and that may be your strategic planning document. That's okay. So I will give you kind of my version of nomenclature that I've found to be effective and it makes sense to me. But that's not what's important. What's important is what you do with this information in your district locally. So how does strategic planning relate to school board work? This is really important. When we think about a school system, we recognize at least three different domains of thinking and acting. One is the strategic level, another is the tactical level, and a third is operational level or activities of the organization. It's helpful to think of these as describing roughly the work of the board, the work of the superintendent and other administrators, and the work of teachers and staff. And very importantly, not to leave the community out. You'll hear a lot of emphasis in this webinar about the community, about community engagement, community involvement, and you'll see that illustrated and woven throughout what we're saying and talking about. The board operates in their own role effectively in the strategic domain. You'll notice that there's an overlap. The superintendent often has at least one foot in the strategic thinking alongside with the board, and another foot in the tactical thinking and operations of the district. And sometimes there are people that need to go up and down in these areas of thinking or responsibility, and that's okay. A lot of governance authors will talk about the board being at the 50,000 foot level, really in a high flying airplane, overseeing and seeing the whole system and everything that's happening. The superintendent and other administrators flying a little closer to the ground, and being able to not only see a bit of the big picture, but also give some direction to the details that are happening on the ground. Keep this picture in mind because you'll see the concept come back here as we think about strategic planning together. Don't miss the importance of the community, the role of the board, superintendent and other administrators, and then the teachers and staff. Because in an ideal world, these different groups of people are working together in harmony. They don't all have the same role or the same job, but they do have a shared responsibility for the success of a school district. One governance author that I really appreciate, Michael Fullen, has written a lot about the concept of coherence. Do these things all fit together? Is what the teacher's doing in the classroom, does that make sense with what the principals and other administrators are doing? Does that make sense with what the board is talking about? And does this all fit together with what our community wants and what their vision of success is for their public schools? So you'll hear me say again, this is a great opportunity for the board to ensure that the community is engaged and involved in the work of the district. And very importantly, there's this overlap in that strategic thinking that the board has. Strategic planning gives this opportunity, the words are too close together, right? Gives this opportunity to involve the community in thinking about the work that the board is doing at a governance level. I want to encourage you in this webinar to expand your thinking about who your community is and how they might be more involved, appropriately engaged in the work of your board and of your school system. Very near and dear to my heart is the fact that school boards make a difference. I wouldn't waste my time talking with you today if I didn't believe what school boards do makes a difference when it comes to student success. There is a growing body of research that shows a connection between how boards behave, act, and the things they talk about at the dais and the impact that can have on student learning. So you'll see that woven throughout this presentation as you think with me, in what ways do school boards make a difference? What can they do that has been shown through research to relate to student achievement or student learning? There are 5 broad areas in research that have a connection, if you will, between what school boards do and the likelihood that students are improving in their success within a school system. The board has a real responsibility to establish a vision and goals for any school system. And very importantly, here's an opportunity to go out and engage the community. You'll see that in item number 4 here, as the board has a real responsibility for advocating for the school system and representing the community to the school system. A lot has been written about number 5 and how when the board does not conduct their business in a transparent or in an integrous way, it can actually harm student achievement in a school system. You'll notice that second one, though, ensuring systems and processes are in place to support the goals. When I became a school board member, I had a son in elementary school, a daughter in middle school, and another daughter in high school. And I really imagined that my role on the school board was partly to help ensure that my kids and their friends had a high quality education. It took me 6 months to a year. I was actually sworn in as a school board member 20 years ago yesterday. And so, there's that memory of what was I thinking? And then what was it really like? And I had to learn that everything in a school system involves a process, right? There is a process for adopting a budget. There's a process for selecting a superintendent. There's a process to running an effective school board meeting. There's a process for everything related to personnel and really the entire system. There's processes, and these processes and systems overlap. The board has a major responsibility to ensure not to run the systems, but to ensure that an effective system is in place. And the board does that as they monitor progress toward the goals and hold the system accountable for results. Strategic planning provides a great opportunity for the board to have a roadmap kind of document that says, this is where we're going, and this is what we're going to hold the system accountable for through the superintendent and their work in the school system. What are we learning? Well, when it comes to governance research, one of the things that we've been learning a lot more about in the last 4 years is the importance of community involvement. We use the word engagement, and I'll talk about that more in a few minutes. We use it in a variety of ways. But ultimately, the community engagement is not about just communicating to the public. It's about involving them in the work of the school system. And I'm not talking about involving them in classrooms or on field trips. I'm actually talking about a higher level of thinking when we talk about the board's role in community engagement. In a study I was involved with the last few years, we found a strong relationship between boards claiming that they were involving their community or doing something related to community engagement, community involvement, and the likelihood that the school system was improving in achievement for all and closing gaps at the same time. This is really important because the more that boards reported that they were recognizing efforts at improvement, involving and considering community and staff input in their decision making, and actually seeking out community and staff input, The D in the parentheses is a statistical symbol. It stands for the concept of effect size. And so what researchers have found is there is an effect between the board saying they do these things, ensuring the public is well informed of the board's roles and responsibilities, and the likelihood that the system is improving in achievement overall and closing gaps. And notice the fifth bullet there. I think this is important. Every school system needs to have an effective process for responding to questions, concerns, comments, or feedback from citizens. That also has been shown to having an effect on the likelihood the system is improving in achievement and closing gaps. So enough of the science, if you will, for just a moment. But to recap that, there is an important relationship between community participation in governance and student success. So strategic planning and systems thinking, these are like hand in glove. As a school board member, we don't automatically come to our role understanding the complexity of systems. The majority of us have never served on a board or served in a role that oversees such a complex system as our public schools. Often across the state of Vermont, the public school system is the largest employer with the largest budget and the greatest impact of anyone within their boundaries. Any kind of system, any kind of company or organization, oftentimes it's that local school system that is the most complex, largest, and most impactful system in the community. So it requires a different way of thinking than if we're used to running our own business or working in some kind of trade or whatever we're used to in our day job. We're going to have to think a little bit differently if we're going to step up, govern and oversee a system as complex as a supervisory union or a school district. I share this visual just as one way to illustrate what we're talking about when we think of strategic planning. There's a foundation, there's a core, if you will. Integrous means that we're the same throughout. It's very similar to the word homogenized, right? When we homogenize milk, we take milk that is all sort of separated and has different components in it, and we make it more integrous. We make it the same throughout. Looking at your board and your district's values and beliefs, frankly, about what is possible can help ensure that a strategic planning process it ends up with an integrous plan, that it's consistent with your values. So I'm going to say, at this point, values are right at the core. And out of that, our vision needs to reflect and sometimes even recite back our values. Our mission extends from that. Our goals should all support the mission. And most strategic plans will have something like an objective, which is really kind of a sub-goal, if you will, and then activities or tasks that will support the fulfillment of the strategic plan. Ultimately, strategic planning is all about the outcomes that it helps to support and often to drive. So engage with me in strategic thinking. We're going to unpack each of these words a little bit as we go along, but this idea of vision, right? It's a word that's commonly used, but we don't always have a shared understanding. I think it's important in a school system when we think about vision, that vision is our ideal state in the future. So as our school system grows, expands, as it succeeds or struggles, what are our greatest hopes for the school system that it will be able to accomplish? And then as you think about that further, what will your system need to do to get there? So if your vision is what you want to accomplish, then what do you do to get there? That should be your mission. You'll hear me say multiple times in multiple ways, one of the challenges that every school system has, The vision statements, mission statements, they're just too wordy. They're not clear. They don't give clear guidance. And one of the challenges that you have when you develop a strategic plan or you facilitate the development of a strategic plan is to keep things simple as possible. You'll hear more about that as we go. This word engagement. Who is included? That's a key question. Who is engaged? And what does engagement mean? So, looking at those concentric circles another way, your values and beliefs have the foundation that should drive your vision, that should inform then your mission, and your mission should be supported by goals and objectives that are consistent or coherent with the activities of the school system that drive your desired outcomes. Values and beliefs, they're foundational. When you don't think about values and or beliefs and you just develop a vision or a mission, you may miss core elements that really desperately needed to be there to reflect who you are as an organization and what is most important to you. Recently, I worked with a board and I asked them last month to share with us some of their values. And this was part of a strategic planning process in one of the larger districts here in Vermont. I'm sharing some of these responses from the board because I think they're really insightful. And maybe they prompt you to think a little bit about, well, what do you value? What do you value individually? And then what do you value collectively for your school system? You'll see these different words like joy and safety, equity, belonging, teamwork, collaboration. I was thrilled to hear the word curiosity, because when we're curious, we're more likely to be open to improvement and to learning and to growth. A key value in the state of Vermont, it should be freedom. It's half of our state motto, right? How do we do this together? And then these values that sort of define what our thoughts are about public education as a foundation for a strong democracy. Look at the diversity of thought that's represented here. Your school board might have a little different set of values, and this is not exhaustive. This board has had other conversations about this as we flesh out what is really important to them. But again, these provide a foundation for an effective vision and mission that represent the core values of the school system. So I was very curious, where did this word vision come from? So I went to Eddie M online, the source is there at the bottom of this slide. And the word vision actually goes back at least to the 1300s in French and in English both. A lot of times it was something kind of supernatural where somebody would see an apparition, a ghost, if you will. It's an image or an idea that would appear. It wasn't until the next century or so that it started to be used as vision or visualize and be described as a person's sense of sight. Actually, in the last century, the word vision began to be used as political insight. Someone that could maybe predict or foresee what was coming into the future was talked about in literature as a visionary. And a lot of times, again, it was in a political sense, but how do we prepare for what needs to come? And that can be an important nuance of the word vision. We get a lot of other words that come from the word vision, like visionary, and they're an extension of this idea. We're imagining something, we're seeing something, and in an ideal world, we're actually seeing effectively into the future, into what could be. For me, this is important, that a vision statement in a school system, it should paint a picture of a desired or an ideal future. Like if we're wildly successful as a school system, this is what 5 years from now, 20 years from now, people will be seeing. This is what they'll be talking about. This is how they'll know. And this is what our ideal future is, gets reflected into a vision statement. There's some guidance for having an effective vision statement. I've already said to you, my personal bias and really belief is most vision statements by school systems as well as other organizations, they're just too long. If they're longer than 2 to 3 short sentences, yeah, how do you remember and what was the point, right? So a vision, an effective vision statement, it's imaginable. It paints colorful pictures that people can see into the future. It's something that different stakeholders in the system, they desire it, right? So it's not just a single interest of one individual or one group, but it's very desirable to a wide group of people. The vision needs to be reasonable in the sense that it's something that the system can attain, can realistically attain, and maybe with a stretch, ideally. It needs to be clear enough that it provides some direction and guidance, so it's focused, if you will. It's important also that a vision has some flexibility to it, so that as an individual reads the vision, they see just a nuanced opportunity for some creativity, for their own imagination to come to play, and it can inspire a teacher, a parent, a student, or an administrator to think outside the box, if you will. I think it's universally true that a great vision statement, it's very communicable. Now, we don't mean in the sense of a disease, but yeah, we do, right? That it's contagious. It catches on, and that it can easily be explained in just a few minutes. So these are some examples of vision statements that are from across the state of Vermont. And I've done my best to change the name of the school district or supervisory union to something you would not recognize. You might guess which two that I like the most. In the middle one on the right-hand side here, a rock-solid education for a lifetime of discovery. I like their vision. It's very grounded, and it's future-focused, and it's focused on students. The one up above that, though, every student will be deeply engaged in his or her own learning, challenged by high expectations, supported by staff, family, and community, and will graduate with the competence and confidence needed for success. I like the direction of that. I think if they had more time, they could make it shorter. And that's a key theme you'll see again. Pascal, the famous mathematician, he said, "I have only made this letter longer because I have not had the time to make it shorter." Probably the number one mistake in vision statements is simply that they're too long. They're designed by committees. Everyone wants their favorite word. No one wants to hurt anyone's feelings. So they get these world-class kind of descriptors that it's like, okay, exactly what does that mean? But, you know, it gets to be kind of flavor of the month. And you can almost tell, you know, what decade or what era that a vision statement was written in by which one of those favorite words got included and which ones didn't. Keep it short if you can. So when I think of a vision and a mission and kind of how they fit together, I really think of this concept of the vision should be aspirational, head in the clouds, and the mission should be feet on the ground, very grounded, very concrete, very specific. An effective mission statement starts with an active verb, and it's not an infinitive verb like to excel. It is excel, right? An effective mission will start with an active verb. We're back to a pyramid. I want to introduce this idea of a moral imperative. We're not going to unpack this. I just want to introduce it. I think it's super valuable for every single school board in the state of Vermont to spend some time thinking about why they exist as a school system and as a board. What is most important to them? What is the moral imperative? What is the thing that causes us to be willing to put up with public criticism, be willing to put up with hours-long meetings, be willing to read hours of board packets and materials? Why do we do that? That's the collective moral imperative. And that why should be present in sort of lifting up the vision, which pulls up the mission, goals, and activities of the system. I'm not actually going to sound out what KISS stands for. If you haven't heard it before, maybe ask a kid or Google it. It's not just a rock group from the 70s, but it means keep it simple. And it was Albert Einstein, a fairly bright guy, who said everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. So as you pare down a vision or a mission statement, you do get to a place where, okay, now wait, is this too simple? Is it becoming simplistic or trite? Are we missing something here? But it should be made as simple as possible. If you know me at all, you know that I like to climb mountains. As I think about a mission, when it comes to mountain climbing, there's a whole lot of preparation that goes into it. When I was a younger mountain climber, the mission was always get to the summit. As you may have heard, wiser, older mountain climbers that live long enough to tell the story, the mission becomes getting back home in bed safely at night, right? But think about your school system. What is the mission? What is the hill that you're trying to climb? What is the upward movement that would help your students live a more successful, prosperous, productive life and benefit your community, state, and nation? Like, what is that mission that calls to you? So I was very curious about the history of the word mission. Where does this come from? And it first started appearing also in French and in the English language about the 1500s, about 1500 exactly. And it meant to dispatch or discharge people, often used in religious terms, a missionary, a person who is sent on an assignment. Quickly, in the very early 1600s, it began to take on this shape of an organized effort. So rather than just a person being launched or sent somewhere, it began to be an organized group effort for a person to be on an assignment. In the early to mid 1900s, we began to use the word mission to refer to aircraft, and particularly military aircraft that was sent on a mission. In about 1962, it also began to be used as a reference to space travel. And so for those of us old enough to remember the Apollo days, there were these missions, and hence then there was mission control, the place where the mission was being controlled. We get some other words out of the etymology of mission, like emission. It's something that's given out or released or let go. And several other words like a commission. There are a lot of things in our English language that relate to this word mission, and it's very important for us to think about. Even more important that a vision statement is short, simple, and clear, a mission statement really needs to be short, simple, and clear. If the mission statement looks like a bulleted list, I would argue it's not a mission, it's a set of goals that are supporting some mission that hasn't been defined. So when you see somebody listing something that's got a mission statement and it's got different statements, or it's got bullets, or it's enumerated, they probably didn't get to the mission statement. What they did was develop a set of goals that would support a mission. Mission statements, again, are short and they're punchy. If they're going to be effective, they have to be really catchy. The good ones, they start with an action verb. They communicate, very importantly, what the organization does. They're very specific in order to focus the work of the association. And they should be something that people in the organization as well as outside of the organization can see, oh, that's what Procter & Gamble does, or that's what Ben & Jerry's does, or that's what your school system does. And great mission statements, they're revisited every few years. They're not written in stone somewhere and carved into the side of the foundation of your school building. There's something that's alive and it's adaptive because it's an active sense, right? So it can't just be some static thing that's not been revised in the last 10 years. Here's some mission statements, or more importantly, this was school board members thinking about mission. So what is our mission as a system? Well, we want to educate and prepare young people. That's a great mission statement right there. Foster a community that is creative and entrepreneurial. Board members talked about a mission, something that's organic and an authentic version of themselves. They're getting students to that place. Educate and prepare young people, again, in a safe and inclusive environment. The mission of creating critical thinkers. That's got to be as important as ever in our society, that we help young people think critically and examine what they hear and what they're told, right? That they have an ability mentally to critically think about information. Here we are again. You'll see there's a theme. One of the biggest mistakes of every mission statement you see, right? One of the most common mistakes, they're just too long. There are too many things. Too many people thought everything had to be included. And so it's hard to know, what is this mission statement really saying? Well, it can be simple and also significant. Perhaps you're familiar with this Mad Men character. Make it simple, but significant. Here's some examples off of websites in Vermont school systems. A good example: ensure each learner is future ready by providing empowering educational experiences. I think they could stop with future ready, but it's okay. Some of these others, there's not only a lot of words there, there's a lot of different thoughts. And that's where it kind of runs the risk. So I think an effective strategic plan has a clear, simple mission: educate kids. And the goals are the statements that support what we do as a system to educate our kids, right? I'm not saying it can't have a couple more words, but it still needs to be short. When you think about a mission statement and a vision statement, a lot of school systems have them. One of the first questions is, well, what's wrong with the statements we have? Well, it depends, right? What needs to be updated? What in the world has changed since that mission statement or vision statement was created? Possibly your mission statement or your vision statement needs to include something about safety. And if not there, then clearly in one of the goals that is supporting your mission and vision. Maybe there's some changes that need to be made to mission or vision statements due to consolidation, either successes with consolidation, challenges or frustrations with consolidation, or with the collective sense of the direction that you hope to go. Most mission and vision statements in school systems across the country are missing something about educational equity. And we're in a different place than we were 2 or 3 years ago on that subject and topic. There might be other changes in your community that would prompt a need. Challenges or successes of the school system, or just changing demographics or opportunities. It can depend, but most of the time, a mission and vision statement need to at least be revisited every 3 to 5 years and perhaps updated. I think it's really important that a school board review their vision and mission statement annually and just sort of embrace it and think about it. Spend a few moments at a board retreat. Are these statements really saying what we need them to say, want them to say? and at least go through that process of examining, is this what we need? I started this out with an emphasis on community and community engagement or involvement. It's very important for a school system today to think about and have conversations about, what are we doing as a board to engage and involve our community in our work? Again, I'm not talking about family to school partnerships, or even partnerships that a school building might have with a community group, whether it's a senior center or a business or an experiential opportunity that they might negotiate. But at the board level, how is the board getting community input in the decisions that the board makes that affect the entire community? If the board will take time to visualize the type of engagement that you want, it can help make the steps more clear in order to get to that end. So we have to talk about this word engagement. The etymology here, it's a fairly newer word, but early in the 15th century, the word engagement meant to have a pledge, literally kind of a handshake. We're going to pledge an oath, if you will. Later, it come to mean that it was occupying attention. It was in the 1600s that an engagement, the word began to refer to a battle, that two different armies or individuals were engaged. In the 1740s, we saw the concept of a promise to marry, and someone would get engaged to another. There would be a proposal, and then there would be an engagement. In the early 1800s, people started using the word engagement as an appointment. So I have an engagement tomorrow at 3 p.m. That would mean that I had an appointment. In the later 1800s, the word engagement came to mean in the sense of machinery or gears, that the gears were engaged. In other words, one was driving the other and they became interdependent on each other. I think that's an important concept for us to think about as a school board. How are we engaged with our community? What is our promise to each other? What are the appointments and the commitments that we're making? Are we giving the community our attention, and are they giving us their attention? But maybe most importantly, this idea of being engaged in a machinery sense. Are we fitting together? Are we in sync? So these nuanced meanings of engagement, again, the promise to marry, a dog and a cat, or a couple of people that are playing or fighting can be an engagement. Engagement can also just be two things that go side by side, like salt and pepper. I think it's valuable for a board to say, well, when we say engagement here, what do we mean by that? What are we talking about? Because it's that higher order of engagement that will produce higher order of results. What does engagement mean to you? And what does it mean to your board? What would your community say about their engagement with the board? And if the community is engaged, what are they saying differently than when they're disengaged? I think these are valuable questions. How are they feeling differently, or what are they doing differently? And you might even self-assess. Is our community engaged? What are they experiencing? An important exercise or step, if a board is going to improve community engagement in their school system, is to ensure that all voices are being heard from. Not just disgruntled individuals, whether it's staff members or family members or even students, but are we hearing from everyone, right? Not just customer complaints, but actual community engagement. In order to do that, most systems really need to sit down, have a workshop. This takes 2 to 3 hours at least, to think about community mapping. Who is our community, right? What are the different subgroups within our community? And if you use a large whiteboard, that's ideal. Large pieces of paper can make this happen, help make this happen. But in our district, well, we have families. That can mean different things, right? Single parent families, families that are headed by an aunt or a grandfather, or different types of families. That becomes a really important distinction if we're going to engage our community. And then the business community, not illustrated on this slide, but might be service groups or faith organizations, libraries, and other kind of shared public groups that might be an important subset of our community. And then any local government. Let's look just deeper, one level down at families. This idea of a two-income family, right? Or a single parent family, or as I mentioned, maybe even a non-parent family. You'll notice I'm trying not to use the word parent very often because not all of our students are living with a parent. And I think it's really important as board members that we think in terms of the most inclusive ways we can, not just our situation or our past, but our students today in our school system. On the school board in which I served in our school system, we had 11% of our students that were being raised by either grandparents or another family member, another relative. And then obviously there are the students too that maybe in the, I'm struggling for the right word, but they're in the adoption placement system, right? They're being foster care would probably be the right word. There are plenty of students that are not in what we think of as a traditional family. So it might be important to talk about and think about the use of the word parent and maybe using family in a different way. It's really important in that exercise community mapping for the board to ask themselves or be asked, who else? Who are we missing, right? What other ethnic groups, racial groups, perhaps religious groups or other groups of people are missing? What about homeless people? Like, who are we missing that we could better connect with? And if we did, our students might be served better. A researcher friend of mine likes to say, engaging the community is more than a PR campaign. Too often we imagine that the newsletter went out and so the community was engaged. I don't know if you've ever done a great poll of how many people in your school system read a weekly or monthly newsletter. It may not be a very large percentage. And if it only goes to families of students, what about all the seniors or other people that live in your school system area that don't necessarily have a child in school that's in their home and they're not necessarily on that newsletter list? But I think the more important principle here is that engagement is not a one-way exercise. Engagement means people are coming together, they're coming alongside, and they're working together. So the key takeaway on this and how this fits is strategic planning is a great opportunity to enhance a culture of inclusivity that really welcomes the entire community into meaningful partnership with the school system. And I want you to think about, as you consider your mission statement, your vision statement, other elements of strategic planning, or maybe a full-blown strategic plan. Who could be included? Who else do you need to involve or include? And I'm going to share something we've shared in some other webinars. These slides will be available to any participant who's signed up for the webinar. This is from one of our sister organizations in the state of Illinois. And I really like this. I'm not taking time to go through each column, but if the board is thoughtful and together with the superintendent, what are we trying to accomplish here? Do we want to inform people? Do we want to consult with them? Do we want to involve with them? or do we literally want to collaborate with them? And the purpose of what you're trying to do will help you find yourself on this organizer. These different columns, what is your objective? Again, are you wanting to just provide information? Okay, that's inform. Or do you want to partner with the community for making a decision? I like these examples here. Again, you'll have these slides available. So I'm not going to cover each one of these right now, but I just want to encourage you to be thoughtful and intentional when you think about community engagement and the difference between engagement and just simply communicating. This leadership maxim has been important to me in my life, and it's a question I ask often of myself and others. What are we wanting people to be involved in? What are we wanting them to be in favor of? What are we wanting them to participate with us in? Because people are not up on what they're not in on. And so if you think about that, how do you expand the circle of folks in your community who are engaged, involved, and thinking with the board so that there's a coherent system of community support, not only for the board, not only for the superintendent and other administrators and the teachers and staff, but ultimately, so there's community-wide support for student success. How do you bring more people into that? Because the more you bring them in and the better you bring them in, the more likely that your school system is improving in achievement and closing gaps. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for a moment here and ask Carrie, have we had any questions or comments in the chat that would be helpful to address?
No, we don't right now. Did you give the instructions on how to leave questions?
Now, does anyone have a question or a comment, something you would like for us to go back to? We won't belabor that, but you can just open your chat at the bottom of the screen, and it should be at the bottom of this Zoom window, and then click and type right there. We'll give you just a minute to think about that. I hope that everyone listening to this webinar is planning to attend our annual conference. It will be in October on the 20th and 21st, and it'll be at Lake Moray. We're actively working on the conference right now, and in the next couple of months, we'll continue to have more information out with who the speakers are and some more information for you. It's also an opportunity, though, I'll display my email address here in just a moment. If you have suggestions, some things you would like to see in the annual conference or not see in the annual conference, we would absolutely love to hear from you, and any suggestions for how to make that most successful. We're particularly interested in some student voice. So if you have some students that have been engaged, involved either with your school board or just doing some outstanding work as a school system, if they've become leaders for equity and improving opportunities for all students, we just love to have them engaged, involved in the conference and kind of presenting or co-presenting. Last night I was with a board that had a brand new student representative on the board, and I think she would be an outstanding speaker at our conference this year. She had a lot of very clear, thought through things to say. And so I did have one question here I'm going to go ahead and address from John. Thanks for the Oh yeah, thank you. Pros and cons of having both a vision and mission statement or going with one. Well, I have a strong preference. I think they are two separate things. I think the vision, that ideal future, is one thing, and then the mission, what we do to get there, is another. You do see that in various ways in school systems. Sometimes you'll see something that looks like a mission, but it's called a vision, or vice versa. And it's not uncommon for them to be combined. I do think that they serve two different purposes. Again, the one communicating, here's where we want to go, and the other one communicating, here's what we do. One of the people I learned strategic planning from was a retired Marine colonel, And so Mike Vidos was very adamant. The mission of a school system is educate kids, educate kids. And I have that kind of reverberate in my mind. And so I agree with him. Ultimately, my school system had, one or two more words in there besides educate kids, but that's okay too, because it needs that local identification, if you will, or individuality. But I think a con is, of having two statements. Well, it's two different things. It can be confusing if they're not well crafted to support the other. And so that's where one statement could be helpful. But my opinion, it would be two if they're well written and short and simple. Simple enough. So let me share my email address with everyone, and just again invite you to follow up with me in an email if you have some other questions, or we can be of assistance to you in any way. Share this that way. My email address is simply pgore, P as in Phil, pgore, G-O-R-E, at vtvsba.org. At VSBA, we're always trying to improve everything we do. So if you have some suggestions, as my friends say, feedback is a gift. If you have some suggestions for improvement or topics you'd like to hear more about in the future, we encourage you to share those with us, and so that we can improve. And then also just quickly make mention, on June 9th, we have another webinar coming up on policy governance. So for those that are interested in that topic, we certainly encourage you to tune in and learn all you can, and come prepared maybe to share your questions or insights with others as well. Let us know how we can be of service to you, and we look forward to the next time we're together in person. Thank you.